but we decided to narrowcast. We're going to write about and create videos on the stuff we love. And if we're enjoying it, somewhere out there's going to be someone else that says, yeah, I like that too. And that's the way it is with Janus. You guys, you're not building motorcycles to compete with Honda or Harley Davidson or anything like that. You're building bikes that you love to ride, and you're finding people are going, I'd like to get on one of those myself.
Welcome to the Janus Motorcycles Podcast. Our kind of motorcycling is different from what you see from big brands and big bikes. We manufacture classic, simple, small displacement motorcycles because that's what we like to ride. And we're not alone. On this podcast, we talk with some of the smartest and most interesting people we know in motorcycling, design, and manufacturing. We're glad you're here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Why We Ride, the Janus Motorcycles Podcast. My name is Richard Worsham, founder and lead designer here at Janus. And I'm joined this time around by a face you all may recognize right away, Grant Longenbaugh, our general manager. And in this episode, our special guest is Rob Brooks. Rob was actually just up here, was it just a week ago?
Yes, sir. Yeah, about a week and a half or so ago, yeah.
A week and a half ago, test riding some bikes. We'll get into that in a little bit. But Rob has been a writer and educator for decades and a lifelong motorcycle rider. After contributing for years to notable magazines like Cycle World, Motorcyclist, Motorcycle Classics, U.S. Rider News, and Born to Ride, among many others, Rob, with several writers and photographers across the states, foresaw the coming death of the print magazine. In January of 2019, they launched Road Dirt Motorcycle Media, an entirely web-based, multi-platform publication. Now, in their fifth year, Rob and the Road Dirt crew have become a major player in motorcycling media, with an ever-expanding national and global reach. They have a main e-magazine website, roaddirt.tv, with a YouTube channel and 3 social media channels, all called Road Dirt TV, a podcast called Road Dirt, and even a Spotify music playlist, Road Dirt Classics. Their goal is to bring a personalized touch to moto journalism and to tell great stories of what they call the ride life. Welcome, Rob. We're
Thank you.
Really excited to have you on.
Glad to be on.
Glad to hear, Rob.
Yeah, Grant, good to see you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. You're up here riding some, putting some Januses through their paces.
Yeah, it just seems like just yesterday. So much fun. Enjoyed it.
Well, tell us. I just read your bio, but tell us a little bit more about yourself. How you got into riding. I know you've been riding for a long time.
Yeah, give us some of the dirt.
A little bit of
that was the road. Give us
some of the dirt on the road. Yeah, I actually came from a motorcycling family. My father was the quintessential 50s biker back in the day. You know, he had Triumph motorcycles back in the 1950s, and then, you know, just growing up, my 2 brothers and I in the 1970s, we always had dirt bikes, mini bikes. You know, my father always had, you know, at least 1 Triumph, sometimes 2, and usually enough extra parts hanging from pegs in the garage where he could have almost built a 3rd one. So, you know, 2 wheels and a motor has really always just kind of been in our blood and in our family, really even beyond my dad and both sides of the family. You know, my mother's father was a motorcycle rider in the early 1900s. It just goes back. So it's you know, it's kind of in my DNA, I guess, in my blood. So, you know.
Yeah. So how old were you when you first put your leg over a 2-wheeled
Oh, that's a
vehicle?
Great question. Before 10 or after 10?
Oh, gosh, man. A motorized bike. I think the first one I ever rode was my cousin, who lived probably just the next town over, so probably about 20 minutes from us. He was about my age, maybe about 10 months older than me. His father, my Uncle Jim, bought him a little Honda Trail 70 or something like that. And and I can remember, I don't know, it was 4th, 5th, or 6th grade when you know, I can remember going over his house on weekends and stuff and riding that thing through the woods. You know, no helmet, no knee pads. You know, just T-shirt and sometimes just shorts, just bouncing through the woods on that little Trail 70. And that was really kind of where it begun for me, because even though my dad had motorcycles in the street bikes in the garage, he didn't get us motorcycles and mini bikes until, my Uncle Jim started buying them for my cousins. Mm-hmm. And it's like, my boys are going over riding over, the relative's house. Maybe I need to get them a couple of bikes so they can ride back in our own woods, which is what happens.
Mm-hmm. And this is in Georgia, Rob?
Yeah, it was in Georgia. I actually grew up. I was born in Texas when my father was still in the Air Force. And by the way, he rode in the Air Force. He used to buy old Cushmans on base and hop them up, with like F111s, Voodoo tires on them and run avgas in them and stuff like that. But before he was in San Antonio. He was based in he was in Okinawa and then in San Antonio before he rolled out and came back home. So I was born there, but they were from Massachusetts. We spent a few years up there where my two younger brothers were born, and then joined the airlines, Delta Airlines, and they had him in Miami, Florida for a number of years in the 60s, early 70s. And then we moved here to Georgia. So we've kind of moved around a little bit, but I'm a Georgia semi-native is what they say down here. Yep. And that was really where we first discovered woods and mini bike and bouncing through trails that we would cut ourselves, as kids. So, yeah, that's where it all started.
So a Trail 70, that's not an unusual story in our owners group. If you did a survey of Janus owners, a lot of Trail 70s, Trail 90s, small off-road bikes. It seems like a lot of folks got into bikes that way. It's unique that I didn't. I don't think, Grant, you did either. We didn't. My childhood was really more about bicycles and just running around. Lots of woods, but not the motorized two wheels. It was really the vintage mopeds that got me into it, which is a different entry point, but it's
similar idea.
It is.
The similar idea is that
wheels and handlebars and a throttle,
But it's an activity that you get into.
First bike we got that my father bought for us were these little Yamaha YZs. The one I remember enjoying the most was a little YZ80.
Yep.
Two-stroke YZ80. And man, I don't know. We probably wrapped that thing around a few trees. Got the bumps, the scars, and the knots on my body to prove that, we beat a few motorcycles up back in the woods as kids. So it's probably another.
Yeah. Well, interestingly,
as well.
the 250, the wheels we use are modern YZ dirt bike hubs and wheels. So it's the same DNA there.
Cool.
So after you obviously dirt is road dirt. When did you hit the road with motorcycling from then?
It's funny because back in high school, I was in high school, late 70s, early 80s. I graduated in 81. Not all of them, but there were about 5 of my friends that got street bikes and were riding street bikes by the time we were graduating high school. And yet, even though my dad was an old biker and had street bikes, had taught me how to drive, how to ride and shift and throttle and everything, his old Triumphs, he wouldn't let me get a street bike, until after I graduated, until I was 18 or older. He just, for some reason, I guess even back then, he was just a little afraid of, maybe he also knew I was kind of half crazy. He knew
he knew you were his son. So he was worried for you.
I was definitely my father's son. So he was like, you're not getting on a bike until you're old enough to be responsible.
He's thinking about all his close calls.
I've written about him too. I've got a pair of stories on our site called Confessions of an Old Hooligan, Part 1 and Part 2. Mm-hmm. And I probably would have had some stories about me similar to his had he let me. But I didn't really get into street riding because after high school, I went off to college and then grad school, got married, started a family, and had, it wasn't until like 1996 when I got bit by the bug to, I want to get back on motorcycles and I want to ride the street. And I bought a 1993 Suzuki VS 800 Intruder. Took the motorcycle safety courses, the the basic rider's course. Later, went back about a year later, took the advanced course on my intruder. And so, yeah, it was actually 1997 when I bought that. So I started street riding in 1997.
But somewhere in between growing up on dirt bikes in 1997, getting into motorcycles, you're a storyteller. You mentioned you like to write. And I think when we were talking, you mentioned that you had a background in radio too. Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah. How did you get this? Is all kind of seems like it's directed toward what you're doing now.
Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, it could. I mean, I started in radio even when I was in college. I was a DJ. I was invited. Actually, before that, I think I was a sophomore. A friend of mine was doing a project for the Georgia State University, where I graduated from, the closed circuit television thing. They were wanting to produce kind of like MTV style, a 30-minute, kind of a VJ host that would talk about, new music videos, but they were Christian music videos. And he asked if I'd be the VJ host for this project he was doing. So we created this 30-minute segment with me as the VJ. I've still got a VHS tape of it, and I almost cringe when my two daughters, hey, let's pull out that tape and stick it back in. And they wanted to watch that of me. But that kind of gave...
Look at how wide Dad's collars were or whatever, right?
Yeah, man. But that's really kind of what started it, because then a position came open at the college radio station, my senior year, and I jumped in. Somebody said, man, you got a pretty good voice. You ought to give radio a try. So I became, before graduating, one of the volunteer, DJs on the station.
You've got a nice face too. Don't worry.
I used to tell folks I've got the perfect face for radio. So, and then I got hot. There was a local radio station in Atlanta that played oldies. It was the AM station of one of the real popular pop rock stations, and 94Q it was called back then. It's called Star 94 now, but their AM station played 50s, 60s, and early 70s music, and okay. I sent an air check, which is a cassette recording of some of your voice work on at the college radio station. They hired me on the spot, and for the next couple of years, I was a radio disc jockey personality in Atlanta, and did it till
on AM radio.
And then I would do weekend work on the FM pop station. I was called on AM. I was Robbie Brooks instead of Rob Brooks. I was Robbie. Somehow it just had a nice ring to it. Robbie the Nightfly. I was nicknamed. I was called the Nightfly, named after an old Donald Fagen album. Some dude called in one night and said, "You're the Nightfly, man. I'm super the Nightfly." And it stuck. I was known as the Robbie the Nightfly on that station. I did that for several years until I got married, and then decided to move into other things, education and teaching and stuff like that. So, but it was a fun period in my life, several years there, where I worked at, I guess even before the college rock station, I did a little gig at a little Christian AM station in Atlanta. I just, kind of fell into it. And all these years later, it's been funny over the years, different jobs I've worked and things like that. I've always been called on to do voiceover work for plays or PSAs on the radio, or narration of something, and now with Road Dirt on videos and on our podcast and everything, I get to use my old radio voice again.
That's great.
This is Rob with Road Dirt.
Rob the Nightfly. That's Robbie the Nightfly.
Rob the Nightfly.
When you do the news, it's Robert Brooks. This is Robert Brooks.
Robert Brooks with the news. All the news well, they don't print anymore, but
I'm going to kick it over to sports with Bob Brooks, and then on the music with Robbie.
That's right. Well, full station, man. I could be my own station.
Well, speaking of, you said, they don't print anything anymore. Well, you also write. And so we'll get to the print. I'm curious to talk about that, but tell us about when did the writing start? Has that been a lifelong thing? And then also, when did that move into motorcycle journalism?
Okay. Well, gosh, I got to dig back into mental archives. It really began I think I think it was like 8th grade for I can remember for one of my English or literature classes. The teacher wanted us to, as a project, to write a short story, and turn it in by the end of the quarter. We were on the quarter system. And I can remember writing a story. It was a science fiction story, of this guy that's captured by aliens and he escapes in one of their, ships only to get shot down or destroyed out in space, by Earth ships thinking he was an alien. It's one of these crazy stories. But I enjoyed just the imagination of coming up with that story and then writing it out. And I got an A on it. She thought it was a great story. And then I didn't really write much throughout high school until my senior year. I took a creative writing course just to fill kind of an elective. And this writing, learning how to write prose, poetry, things like that. And by the end of the semester, the teacher caught me one. It was like the last class of the day, and she asked me to stay after and chat with her for a minute. And she says, Rob, you have a gift. You're a very gifted writer. And she says, I want to encourage you to spend the rest of your life exercising that gift and writing, whatever form it is, write, because you're a good writer. And she says, too, some of what you've written, I'd like to publish in a state student publication for you, if you'd be okay with that. And, of course I was. And some of what I wrote was published in a Georgia state. I don't remember the name of the publication, where schools would submit student work and it would be published in these little periodicals. And I had one or two of those that she sent me, and I've lost them years ago. And that really kind of played into, over the years, I was in Christian education, working in churches, working in schools, teaching history, things like that. So I've always written stories and lesson plans and study guides and stuff like that. Contributed to a number of Christian education publications, just about the line of work I was in as a teacher and as an educator and stuff like that. But I guess it was probably early 2000s when I just started writing, about my passion, my motorcycling, writing journaling, first of all, online journals and personal journals, and then submitting those, just as an amateur to motorcycle publications. And one by one, they started running them, and it just kind of built and grew from there. I think the first publication I was published in, it was a motorcycling publication, was Motorcyclist magazine. Mm-hmm. They started, I just made this submission to a column they used to have called Me and My Bike. And I wrote about a 1998 Yamaha Royal Star Tour Classic, an accident I had that nearly killed me on the 800 VS 800 I had. And then about a year later, getting on this bike and how it kind of, how it was therapy itself, mm-hmm. And they loved the story so much. They said, we like your style. Why don't you submit stuff to us from time to time? We'll see what we can print for you. And they did. And then started contributing to Cycle World and American Motorcyclist magazine and motorcycle class. It just kind of took off from there. I ended up, offered a job and getting hired by a Southeastern regional publication known as Born to Ride Motorcycle Media. And for a little over 4 years, I wrote a regular column and covered racing and rallies and some, and bike reviews for them and stuff like that. And, you just kind of fall into things, and they just snowball and doors open and you just keep walking through doors. And that's kind of how motorcycle journalism took off for me that way.
Sometimes it feels like it's a big, tall tower that you got to get to the top of, and then you scratch the surface a little bit, and it's a couple dudes trying to not cobble, but it's a lot of people putting a lot of passion into a publication, mm-hmm. and when they see folks reciprocate that, they say hop on board, and it's not a lot different than what we've done here at Janus too, and making motorcycles instead of making magazines, but it's a good reminder to just, knock on the door. And like you said, it usually opens if you show your interest and your passion.
Just ask, seek, and knock, and doors mm-hmm. will open. You're exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. So our stories really do parallel each other. I discovered as when I was up there with you guys. It's really mm-hmm. cool.
And it's really fun to see. I'm sure it feels like a great coming of, or a great fruition to have two of your lifelong passions kind of converge at this, and be able to do this. It's crazy. Some of the things that you're passionate about in elementary school come back and you're doing it when you're in your maturity. It's amazing. And Richard's the same way.
Yeah, good Lord gifted me with. I always tell folks, I can't sing, I can't dance, can't play an instrument, but I can talk and I can write. I do those two things.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I can spin a yarn and I can tell a story about it. So.
What are some of the really what's some of the interesting ways that that you've seen? I heard you poke at this a little bit when you were here, but what are some of the ways that you've seen the motorcycle journalism industry really, like, what would be, how have the tides changed? We talked about how, like, the meat hasn't really changed. People still want to read stories. They still want to hear from folks.
Yeah.
I just would love to kind of get your topography of how things have changed in journalism, and a lot of how they haven't, but just in maybe the delivery or I'll take my answer off the air, Rob. But yeah.
Just to be kind of in the middle of it all, as we've been operating in an internet world for since the 90s practically. And some publications like motorcycle.com have always been online. They've never been a print publication. And there's others like that, but mostly for decades, just like in every other industry, travel and, cooking and things like that. There's been these publications that have been around forever and for decades. And yet here we were in the 2000s, late 2000s into the 2010s here, 20 teens. And, some of the other guys that when I launched Road Dirt, these friends I had made, photographers and journalists around the country that you just meet when you're running the same circles for motorcycle reviews or covering racing, or you just end up making these friendships and relationships, kind of like you guys do in motorcycle production and things like that. But I began to see in even 2012, 2013, that more and more of these publications were trying to build websites, and then trying to figure out, all right, if you've got paid subscribers to a magazine that they get once a month or something, how are you going to translate that into paid subscriptions on a website? And a lot of them weren't really figuring out all that well how to do that. And then by 2015, it started really accelerating as more and more these brands were finding less and less people because of the, in this digital age now with social media that can be used to promote things and drive eyeballs and traffic and things to websites and all. They began to see a lot of these publications that I used to contribute for. I began to see and learn that their readerships and subscriptions were declining rapidly as younger generations and more people were just, reading content online and getting their content on social media and on these websites and stuff. And I can remember sitting with lunch with one of the guys, a guy named Phil, that kind of helped me launch Road Dirt. We did it together and just said, print's going to die soon, man. And it's going to affect motorcycling because we're a very small niche, and, and within a few years, one by one, these magazines, started being bought by larger entities. And then, like, for instance, Motorcyclist and Cycle World were bought by the same company called Bonnier, and as well as Sport Rider. I could name, I think they bought up 5 or 6 different motorcycle print magazines, and then one by one killed every one of them. Just cut them off, killed every one of them. And Motorcyclists and Cycle World were like the last ones, and they kept Motorcyclists till a certain year, kept Cycle World quarterly for about another year, and eventually, they just kind of dovetailed everything and now everything is digital. And it was funny because
one of those.
Go ahead. I'm sorry,
Rob. One of those. I was looking at one of those. I forget what publication it is. Like is it Cycle World? It's the online version, and then there's another twin to it, and they're both owned by like a power sports financing company.
Yes, yeah. Bonnier sold Motorcyclist and Cycle World, and probably if some of the other titles just disappeared completely, several of them, and they started combining.
That was very interesting.
The writers for, they cut staff just dramatically, as well as the entire print side. They didn't do any of that anymore. But and so guys you'd see an author for Motorcyclist was also an author for Sport Rider, and he was also authoring stories for Cycle World. Mm-hmm. And then they sold it all right to a power sports finance company, and now that's really what pays the bills for these small. You got these multiple quote unquote publications. They're just websites now, but there may be 4 or 5 writers that do all of these now. They just write and put stuff to different websites now. With this entity like you're talking about that behind them that owns it all and finances it through motorcycle power sports financing. You're exactly right. It's a weird world.
The other thing that I find interesting is that some of the best news that I've found recently, excluding like traditional, like Motorcycle Classics, for instance, is one that we've worked with a lot over the years, and it's a print magazine. Yeah. At least it is, as of today, still a print magazine. We really love those folks.
2 or 3 that are as well.
Yeah. Apart from that, like RevZilla and their what is the name of their Common Tread?
Common Tread. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Tread. A lot of the motorcycle media is being produced by these consumer sites, and it's almost like it's a symbiotic relationship between their retail. Mm-hmm. I wonder, is that you agree with that? Is that pretty common, you think?
It is. RevZilla has obviously done the best job with it. I know Lance Oliver, the editor over at Common Tread, he's been with them since they launched it like 15, 16, 17 years ago. They were the first big online power sports outlet to develop a blog that's become just a full-blown, what I call an e-magazine. I wrote and contributed to one for bikebandit.com for a while before they eventually folded it. And me and another guy, but
they're probably trying to do the same thing.
Yeah. And that pays the bills for their writers, is the fact that
that's interesting.
It's great content. They're legitimate writers and photographers and everything, all traditional motorcycle journalists, but their bills are paid by sales on RevZilla,
And RevZilla gets traffic by organic. It is very symbiotic from a marketing standpoint. I'm sure that they get a lot of organic search ranking from people searching for,
right.
The Yamaha review or, something like that. New Biltwell.
And that's replaced the advertisements that were in the old magazines, right?
Yep.
I also think of probably the one of the best audio visual content creators is Ryan Fortnight, and that's also a parts supplying company, isn't it? If I believe, Canadian.
So. He's up in Canada.
So it's the same thing is happening.
Mm-hmm. And it's always kind of been that way. The commerce has paid the bills for the creativity. It's the kind of the patronage. Yeah. And
then you got little independents like us that, after writing for Born to Ride for several years and realizing that, they're still in print. They're one of these ones that you go to, one of these types that you go to a motorcycle shop or dealership or something, and you find these free magazines that are just advertiser driven, and they're still pretty big here in the South. But they appeal to an aging demographic that's aging out of motorcycling. And I wanted to try to develop something that, even as I aged, I still feel young at heart. I felt like I want to capture the next generation and continue to generate interest in this sport, this passion we have for riding, and with like-minded friends who were writers and photographers. That's what we did in 2019, and I left Born to Ride to jump off into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, with road dirt and motorcycle media.
So let's talk about that. What are you doing that's different? I mean, because it is, it's not major consumer motorcycle parts and apparel funded operation.
No, we're
How do
not
you
backed
all make
by.
it? How do you make it work?
Yeah, we're not. What we aren't is we're not backed by a major finance company or a major publishing company or a RevZilla or Bike Bandit style entity that funds us. I mean, we're independent. We just kind of launched it on our own. Launched it as a legitimate LLC and took out a business loan to launch it all. And we basically, pay the bills through gifts and advertisers that advertise on our site and advertise on
Okay.
our social media and advertise on our YouTube channel and things like that. It's you know I wish it could be a full time. I do it full time, but I also have some other means of income, just to kind of help supplement. And my wife works, so.
Yeah.
But the dream is to really be able to, to be able to pay the bills enough where I can, have more to be able to pay writers and photographers more regularly and things like that. Because we're basically just, living hand to mouth with, sponsors on the main site. Like Moto America partners with us, and Law Tigers down here in the Southeast, and several other entities that that either do it yearly or seasonally with us. And that's kind of the old school model. It's almost the magazine model, because that's what really kept magazines back when Motorcyclist, for instance, was independent decades ago, before they were owned by some media company, bought and sold over the years like that. They had an advertising department. They sold ads for the magazines, and that paid for the writers and the photographers and the printing and things like that, and helped it continue to go and grow. And we're kind of that old style model in that regard. What keeps roaddirt.tv, going are paid advertisers that like what we do, and they sponsor us.
And the same thing, it's very much the same on, Ryan Fortnight. I'm sure his YouTube channel is subsidized by AdSense, because he gets so many, Google pays him to to run ads on his channel, and it's all advertiser driven.
On the YouTube channel, Road Dirt TV, same model, yeah. That's right.
Yeah, he's figured out how to very elegantly slip in his promotions too to his videos.
He does, yeah, he does. Yeah, he's good at that.
How has it been? Have you felt like the world of manufacturing has, it was really fun to hear you say that you get to go, you have a great relationship with some major OEMs, and I'm curious to know how that has maybe changed over the years. If you feel like it's maybe a little bit more democratized, or a little bit, is access to, the brand new flat track racer from, Indian, easier to get as a roaddirt.tv, or, just kind of, I'm curious to know how that's been as a relationship to be able to kind of perform that task of motorcycle journalist, to provide reviews and to interface and to get to know the OEM, so that we get to read about it and see it. You kind of almost have to answer that by looking back through motorcycle journalism history a little bit, and really broader motorcycling in America over the last 30 to 50 years. I mean, there was a time especially it was growing in the 60s, really getting big in the 70s, 80s into the 90s. Motorcycling in America was huge, and people, our generations, were learning how to ride as kids and growing up riding as adults and passing that on to our kids. But in the last 20 years or so, motorcycling is really falling. I wouldn't say it's fallen out of favor, but it's falling out of the cultural zeitgeist, so to speak. I grew up, and you guys are probably, you're similar in the sense that your father rode, and you rode, and your kids rode after you. It was just growing up there were several decades there where growing up in America, one of the things you learned how to do was how to ride motorcycles too. It's just part of growing up in America. Well, it's not anymore. We tried to, both of my daughters
my wife and I, our two girls, they're in their early 30s now. They grew up on the back of motorcycles with me. They grew up riding little dirt bikes and mini bikes and stuff like that. And, but yet neither one of them now owns a motorcycle. They'll come over here and throw a helmet on and take a ride with their old man for a day. But these last couple of generations, the millennials and the new Gen Zers, just haven't jumped into motorcycling like previous generations. I've heard people say it's because of just, now these little devices right here, we just become, there's so many other distractions, satellite where you can watch 1,000 channels. You can subscribe and watch anything on 1,000 channels. You can watch anything on iPhones and iPads. Everything's on the web, on social media nowadays. And the interest in outdoor power sports has just fallen off dramatically in recent decades. I think some of the ups and downs in our economy in the last 15, 20 years also has kind of precluded people getting into motorcycling. So consequently, that's affected motorcycle journalism.
Yeah.
There was a time that brands, not the major motorcycle brands in America, they were all headquartered in Southern California, as well as a lot of the major motorcycle publications were out in Southern California. So they would put on a a brand like Yamaha or something would put on a press junket and invite journalists and writers from these big publications, and and they'd ride for several days and then they'd go write about it. And you still see a lot of that. The brands are still trying to do that, but because the landscape has changed, you don't have these big brands like Motorcyclist, Cycle World, others like that. You don't have them, as the only players anymore. Now you've got all these social media entities and these influencers and small independent outfits like us, as well as RevZilla's Common Tread people, which are funded. And I've met a lot of them. So they still, in one sense, the brands still want relationships, but they're trying to figure out their way through this new digital landscape themselves. How to use social media, how to use these influencers that are out there and these new medias like us and others that are popping up. At the same time, us out there, we're trying to, connect with them, letting them know, hey, we used to, like the way I sold myself and still do with a lot of these brands is I used to write for this magazine and that magazine and that magazine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we knew so and so.
Interesting.
Hey, why don't you come out for such and such with us? And a lot of
you make it easy for them, and they will be on board because they're trying to feel their way forward in the new landscape too. Yeah,
you've got to be proactive with them. I have to, when we launched Road Dirt in January 2019, I had to introduce myself to a lot of these brands. This is who we are. This is where I came from. And this is what we'd like to do with you guys. And they were all like, we're trying to find our way to the new landscape ourselves. We'd love your help and love to work with you, love to help you. So it's kind of how it's going.
Yeah. One of the things that Richard and I have been, has been in our marketing conversations and kind of in our education is the difference between native digitals and native analogs. And folks, but I am hopeful and pretty certain that there's going to, the pendulum always swings a little bit. And one of the things that I've been hearing on social media now is escape to IRL and people. And I think it's a great opportunity for power sports, as long as we're there for them and we're listening to new generations that, young people, wherever you want to draw that line, live their lives in a digital landscape and offering a compelling activity that is fun and engaging and, all the, the human urges that we have to have community and have fun and get our face melted a little bit and have a couple risks here and there and see new things and meet new people. That's kind of
really, that's really interesting. You could really riff on that. Like the idea that, like Rob, what you were saying, that there are a lot of distractions with the younger generation. And you held up a phone, and maybe we could talk about that in a positive way, where we could just say there's a lot more things to do. in the last 20 or 30 years, other than, I mean, I wonder if,
and a lot
things
more
like
ways to communicate and get
fishing,
the word out about it. Yeah.
yeah, I wonder if fishing is also not as popular with young people. I don't have the facts on that, but it's interesting to think that the motorcycle industry in the last 20 or 30 years, simultaneously, they tried to add a lot of these distractions into their bikes, like a lot of technological gadgetry and stuff like that, they thought add to the motorcycle experience. And now Grant's
For
talking
some
about,
people it does.
yeah, absolutely. I think it does. But like Grant's talking about the IRL in real life, maybe I think that's the tack we're taking with it is how do we make motorcycles that get back past that stuff to a more IRL experience?
Yeah. You used the word when I was up there, a visceral experience, and that resonates with me. What's making a comeback in motorcycling is off-road.
Oh yeah.
The brands are selling dual sport and adventure motorcycles and dedicated dirt bikes like crazy, just like back in the 60s and early 70s.
Good.
That's where the power sports industry is seeing the most growth right now. Is back in.
That's very promising.
People are playing in the dirt again, and adventure bikes have all kinds of tech on them. Your average dual sport and dirt bike isn't. It's just they may all be 4-strokes, most of them 4-strokes nowadays, but they're like the dirt version of Janus Motorcycles. They're getting these younger generations that are being introduced to motorcycling back to the visceral experience of a throttle and 2 wheels and a motor.
That's on your on any Sunday kind of culture that brought all these all the folks that are riding now into biking.
Yeah.
I
think very promising.
The cycle, as the world turns, right? I think it will come back around so long as we, as a motorcycle designer, Richard, or as a journalist, Rob, you follow your gut and you write the things you want to read and you make the bikes you want to ride. And that's been the exciting thing about Janus is that we've been able to, if we were a small dealership / manufacturer in a small town, we would sell 3 bikes a year. But we were able to, the tools before us we were able to do something very different that was like a splash of cold water in relation to some of the feature heavy designs of the whatever, and we were able to almost instantaneously find at least 100 people that thought it was cool, and then 1,000 people that thought it was cool, and then hopefully more and more and more.
Yeah, I think when I was up there, one of the things I said that I really felt very much a kindred spirit with you guys was we decided early on in road dirt not to be everybody to everything to everybody. We're not going to compete with Common Tread. We're not going to try to compete with the digital versions of Motorcyclists and Cycle World. We're not going to be able. There's no way we're not going to be able to cover everything, be everything to everybody. But we decided to narrowcast. We're gonna write about and create videos on the stuff we love. And if we're enjoying it, somewhere out there's going to be someone else that says, "Yeah, I like that too." And that's the way it is with Janus. You guys, you're not building motorcycles to compete with Honda or Harley Davidson or anything like that. You're building bikes that you love to ride, and you're finding people are going, "I'd like to get on one of those myself."
Yeah,
and, you're narrow casting in a sense. You got a specific bait on the end of that little hook right there, casting it in a particular
People
pond.
still do fish.
You're catching fish, man.
Yeah.
Use your analogy, Richard.
So, Rob, what is it that you all? What is your narrow band? What do your readers appreciate about what road dirt, your content that you're putting out? How is it different?
What I gather, what our heart and our passion is, and what I gather from the people that follow us on roaddirt.tv and on our YouTube channel and all the groups and stuff on our social media that follow us and interact with us. I've always wanted to be just a band of brothers and sisters that are storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what people tend to enjoy about us. We've heard so many times that, when we'll do a review of, say, just recently, we did a review of the Indian Scout Rogue, or the Triumph Speed Triple 1200 RS or something like that. And people will message us and interact with us saying, I love the way you guys review stuff. You don't give the specs and details that you can find out on the website. You tell a story about it. You tell us how you feel about the bike or how the bike makes you feel. We love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's forced me to actually, because I still read a lot of those other publications, and when they do something on a race or on a rally or on a bike or some gear or something, just to read what they're doing out there. And I find it so stale because, anybody can go look up the specs and deets on a bike or a piece of equipment.
Yep.
We're just a bunch of guys right now. I don't have any lady riders. I'm looking for somebody that would write for us. That's a gal. We're just a bunch of fellas that love motorcycling and love writing about it. We call ourselves fanboys of motorcycling. So we just love telling stories about what we call, we kind of created our own hashtag a few years ago, hashtag ride life. And I think we're very clever with that. So, but
it's in IRL. We could make some plays on that.
Yeah. And you guys, hashtag rambling. So
yeah.
But and that's kind of what makes us different, I guess. We're just a bunch of guys that love to ride, and we love to write about it and tell. We're just storytellers. We attract storytellers, and we attract people that love to read stories. So
well, I think that's kind of it's kind of an inversion of what at least the kind of the consonants with what we're doing, Rob and Richard, is that you said actually the reason why you're reading this review is because you want to read a story, even though the reason why mainstream publications or for forever they considered that it was their job and the sole purpose to talk about specs and to talk about the technicalities of the ride. Mm-hmm. And you're saying actually the real reason why people buy and are interested in a bike is something that's a little bit more story driven or personal driven, or maybe a little harder to put a finger on or to put a number sign on. Mm-hmm. It's definitely harder to talk about sometimes, but when you hit the right kind of relationship, or it's a relational aspect rather than a specifications or an objective, and that's what we're doing too at Janus. I mean, like, it's harder for us to say, well, this beautiful design is worth this much money. In one way, when the whole industry is saying, well, if it doesn't have 200 horsepower, you can't charge $15,000 for it, because that's what the standard is.
We've really gone like whole hog in the opposite direction. I was just having a conversation yesterday or the day before about how basically we're not using the spec sheet isn't making us sales.
No. It might help people justify it, but probably not. If they look at it too much, they'll probably say it's not worth it.
But when you get right down to it, whether it's with you guys and with us, the same general principle is true. Even this younger generation that loves all the high tech and loves to learn, and loves the technicalities and the details and the specifications, the digital gearheads, they still love a good experience, a good relationship, and a good story.
Yep.
And that's really, to use your word, that's really the selling point.
Yeah.
Is the relationship between individuals, between entities, and between human being and machine out on the open road.
Yeah.
Being with you guys for those days and riding your bikes out in Amish country, that even after you let me take off on a couple of them, I just spent the afternoon riding, and I'd come back, hop on another one, take it out for a ride. I was just digging the rambling vibe, man. I was in the zone. I could feel it. And just a good reminder, of what we're all about is road dirt, and what you guys are building. You're building an experience, and you're creating an experience that even people that love high tech can hop on one of those bikes and go, there's no ride modes, there's no traction control, there's no map I can tweak, with a computer. It's just clutch, throttle, and go, baby.
Yep.
It's refreshing. It really is.
And to say it's refreshing means that it's also fun to, just like it's nice to drink, a cup of hot coffee. It's nice to have a cup of cold water too. It's like we are big believers in a big, broad motorcycle market with a lot of offerings, and as kind of, it's our little corner of the playground, and
your little corner of the pond, and you're catching fish.
Yeah. Right. And we're saying there's fish over here too. There's fun to be had on these little bikes. And we're not out to kill the road, the Gold Wing or the Road King. We're here to say there's more out there to, or the GS is a spaceship that's to be, they just shipped their millionth GS I saw on Instagram today. That's amazing. That is so cool.
Awesome.
It could take you to the moon. I guarantee it if you had a spacesuit on.
That's right.
That should exist. So should a Halcyon 250.
Get your Aerostitch.
So, yeah, exactly. Yep.
So should the little Griffin 250 that you can go bounce around in the woods with. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Rob, what's next? Where do you think the motorcycle, journalism is headed, and what's next for Road Dirt?
In one sense, I think print might make a little bit of a comeback, almost as like a little novelty over on the side of motorcycle journalism. You look at Iron and Air and some like that they're basically once or twice a year coffee table books with more photos and captions than actual stories.
Rob, they just shipped their last issue though.
Did they really? Oh my gosh, they're going the way of the dodo as well, huh? Wow.
Yep.
I wasn't aware of that.
But interestingly, sites like Bike Thief are doing really well, which Bike Thief I think teamed up with Iron and Air for a little bit. But that's where I get a lot of content. I mean, I spent a lot of time looking at those bikes.
Hypeburn and
Bike Thief based out of Australia?
They are, yep.
That's what I was thinking, yeah. A couple of good publications down there. I see motorcycle journalism in broad terms becoming much more, bite-sized chunk oriented. And the reason I don't mean to sound negative, but we live in a culture that is driving. We live in a world that is being driven by so much digital information that it's just to get more eyeballs. It's becoming shorter and smaller, quicker sound bites. YouTube. YouTube is trying to get people, content creators, to do shorts, little shorts. 15-second, 30-second shorts. You see that on Facebook Reels. You see, and I'm seeing in the broader sense, motorcycle journalism, becoming more images, videos with a little caption underneath it, kind of becoming more of where it looks like it's heading in the future. And yet. Yeah. Because maybe I'm just, an old fart. Me and a bunch of guys that write and shoot for us, we're just a bunch of old school guys. We still believe there will always be a place for a well-told story. It doesn't have to be 5 or 6 pages, 6,000 words long. Yep. But there's always going to be a place, even among younger generations, there's going to be a place if you tell a compelling story that gets people past the first paragraph and they want to read, and then they'll see the image. I don't ever want to come to the point where the images and the videos, especially on the website roaddirt.tv, where you're just there for the images and the videos and maybe a little bit of content. I want people to go to roaddirt.tv to read the stories that me and my crew me and the guys are writing, because I think there's always that's kind of where, like, you guys are going to go. Everything in motorcycling and the big brands is going toward higher and higher tech and bigger horsepower. You guys decided to take the road less traveled, to quote Frost. And I'm kind of feeling the same way with Road Dirt. I think it's more and more in the digital space is going to become more and more image and soundbite and video driven. And we're going to do that as much as we can, but we never want to lose sight of the fact we're going to take the road less traveled of being good storytellers. Because I think there'll always be an audience for that.
There still is. And, why are we hanging out here on a podcast? Because we all listen to podcasts, and it's I listen to, 5 hours of podcasts a week. That's just a
Lots of
voice
people do.
talking in my ear, you know, and
Yeah,
and people listen to even more of that.
I love history podcasts as well as
Yeah,
motorcycle
absolutely.
podcasts.
Me too.
I mean, what's one of the top history podcasts of all time is the Hardcore History, and he does 26-hour 26-hour histories on and
he maybe produces 2 or 3 a year,
and it's amazing. So yeah,
and that's kind of I'm with you guys on that.
well, that's awesome. We're with you too. So
Yeah.
the one of the best copywriting advice I got was the goal of the first sentence is to get the person to read the second sentence, and the goal of the second sentence is to get them to read the third sentence, and the goal of the third, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And if you're a good writer, if you're a good storyteller, somebody will read 2,000 words from you because they want to see what happens next.
And then even better than just getting them to read your content is you establish a relationship with them. We believe at Road Dirt, if we don't need to hashtag this, but one of the guys early on named Ted that writes for us from up in the Pacific Northwest, he says, you know what? We're all about relationships. Relationships are everything in the industry with fellow riders and with, it's all about relationships. And if you can get somebody to read your story, you get it. There's a connection through that story, and I love connections and relationships even more than just trying to sell content or anything. That's really more important to me. Relationships.
It's some of the hardest things to build, and the hardest things to the most worthwhile endeavor, really. So
it's the most satisfying when you finally do establish those. Very satisfying.
Yeah. Well, this has been, I think, an exercise in doing just that. And I hope that
that was a good wrap up, guys. That was a good altar call.
Yeah, it was. I hope that folks that are
every head bowed, every eye closed, dude.
I hope that folks that are listening check out Road Dirt, Motorcycle Media. Rob, give us once more where we can find your YouTube and print, or not print,
our digital
your stories.
Yeah. Our main e-magazine is roaddirt.tv. And that's where all of our contributors, all the different, guys that write and shoot, we all contribute to roaddirt.tv. And then our YouTube channel is simply Road Dirt TV without the dot, just Road Dirt TV. And we've got a lot of reviews and rides and different coverage and things like that out there. The latest one is you guys, the video we did with y'all. It's kind of a walk through, from iron coming into the warehouse to finished product. We had a good time putting that together. And then on social media, same thing, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We've got Road Dirt TV, and Road Dirt Motorcycling is a Facebook group with a lot of interaction on there. And then, like you said, we have our own podcast. It's called Road Dirt. And Richard, our conversation, is out on there when you and I had a conversation in your shop. Great. And of course, we all listen to music nowadays. We've got a Spotify music playlist called Road Dirt Classics. Just road music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even some current stuff. Just old. So
you're telling me that Robbie the Nightfly came back for the Spotify playlist?
Man. That's right. That's it. And just Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild kind of stuff, out on that channel. You can find that out there. Yeah.
I'll hop in my GTO and go take a night ride with Robbie the Nightfly.
Come on.
Pop on the
thank you for a ride.
Trans Am. Yep. That's right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you guys. Enjoyed the time with you. Enjoyed my time with Janus. Best to all of y'all as well.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Well, we'll keep it going. This is a relationship that I look forward to continuing for a long time. We'll get you back up here for
more. You guys, for sure.
Yep. Catch you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.